Many years ago, fishing lodges were established on the outposts of civilization. They were Spartan and operated by bush pilots, ardent to fly eager clients to the furthest reaches of the last frontier. The commute was spectacular, the adventure unparalleled. It was a time when the waters were a virgin blue and the world innocent. Anglers came for the adventure and left with stories of trout the size of salmon. While many wild places have since been tamed, Bristol Bay still stands as a pristine monument to the primeval beauty of yesteryear. In this out-of-the-way place, countless sockeye return to perpetuate life. Their journey is seemingly tragic, but in death, salmon provide life to this freshwater ecosystem. Every creature that walks above or swims below is inseparably connected to the anadromous circle of life. This vast sea of reds is what has transformed Bristol Bay into one of the greatest trout habitats on Earth. Our fish story begins on the banks of Lake Iliamna at world-famous Bristol Bay Sportfishing. After a warm Alaskan greeting, we readied the gear and got the latest fishing report from our good friend Joe.
This is just some of the most amazing country in the state, and it's remote, it's wild, access is tough, it's only accessible by float plane. It's uncrowded fishing, and it's still amazing fishing. The quantity, the quality is still there. There's big fish, lots of them.
After a short flight, our fishing adventure began on the infamous Iliamna River. According to legend, Iliamna was the name of an enormous black fish that patrolled the depths of this massive lake. This mythical beast made a living devouring canoes and terrorizing natives. Well, lucky for us, canoes weren't required, and ironically, natives were scarce to be found. Even still, there was a magic in the air that was unmistakable. It was immediately apparent that we were mere guests in a vast wilderness. With over 365 million acres of boreal forest, glacier-packed peaks, and wide-open tundra, this land was just begging to be explored. Here on the Ili, there's moose on the loose, and the bare necessities are still the facts of life. En route to finding the rest of our group, we motored over salmon by thousands. In this remote place, we even bumped into a few anglers along the way. It was finally time to fish, so we asked our guides what made the Ili so special.
We have some of the clearest water that you'll ever see. The Iliamna River in particular is like looking into an aquarium. You've got sockeyes, you've got char, you've got rainbows, and it's got a bluish green tint to it that's just amazing.
The coin phrase "getting silly on the Ili" came about last year. It's just due to the fact that there are so many fish in such gin clear water. You can pick a fish and you can hunt that fish. And it's great because it gives the beginning angler a reference point to where to cast to or what to aim for. And the more advanced angler can pick out that one big fish, and he can go for that one big fish and try to avoid some of the little ones. So it's silly. It's a great time.
On a perfect gravel bar miles from the closest road, we set out to educate some fish. To start off, we targeted Dolly Varden, feisty members of the char family. These fish were fly-friendly, tolerant of a rusty presentation, and went plain nuts for anything pink and round. Beads, glow bugs, unreal eggs, you name it. They just couldn't get enough. The char's feeding pattern followed classic match-to-hatch kinetics. As millions of sockeye laid thousands of eggs, months of famine quickly turned into a gluttonous midsummer's feast. Because the Ili was still in the early stages of the sockeye run, many of the larger rainbows were still in the lake. For all we knew, they were probably feeding on mythical blackfish somewhere. Several energetic rainbows provided a nice preview for what we hoped would continue in world-renowned Katmai National Park. In Bristol Bay, sockeye runs peak at different times, so if the fishing isn't as fast-paced on one river, just hop in the plane and try another. As we discovered, you're sure to find a hot spot over the next ridge, or maybe even under the next riffle. As minutes turned into hours, we landed one last Dolly Varden, and were content with tight lines, beautiful scenery, and amazing wildlife. It seems like yesterday's pace was a little slower. For the first time in a long while, we were able to enjoy the commute back home after an honest day's work. It felt great to be away from the concrete jungle and daily rat race. Out here, there are no cell phones, laptops, iPods, or worries. This is the perfect place to kick off your shoes and relax your feet. As always, Joe was eagerly waiting for us back at the dock. After catching up, we planned the next day's camping adventure at world-famous Moraine Creek. Roughing it in Katmai National Park is an optional once-in-a-lifetime activity. For those who are physically fit and brave enough to sleep with the bears, the experience comes highly recommended. After our powwow, we headed back to our log cabins and got cleaned up for dinner. The tasteful decor and delectable cuisine were semblant of a 4-star restaurant, sans the stuffiness. The atmosphere was relaxed, and we enjoyed a good old-fashioned family dinner overlooking Lake Iliamna. When you come to Bristol Bay, you'd better bring your appetite, because it's a well-known fact that not even lumberjacks can finish one of Janice's meals. After dessert, we told tall tales of catching whales and even shot some pool. It felt good to relax and spend time in such friendly company. With midnight fast approaching, we said goodnight to the northern country as the golden sun's last reflections faded into black.
Most people don't realize how big Alaska is and how many lakes and rivers and streams and mountains we have. It's huge country, and without the aircraft, you just can't get to where you need to be.
Joe's de Havilland Beaver was nicknamed the Little Yellow School Bus. She was fast, powerful, and as reliable as Old Faithful. En route to Moraine, we learned that 17 of the 20 highest peaks in all of North America are found in Alaska. There are more active glaciers and ice fields here than anywhere else in the inhabited world. In fact, over 5%, or 29,000 square miles, is covered by glacier. The scenery was beautiful, and the time in the air flew by. Before we knew it, we had begun our descent to Crosswinds Lake. This was the drop-off site where we would ready our packs and prepare for the half-hour hike into Moraine Creek.
Most campers on Moraine tend to camp right at Crosswinds Lake. I tend to encourage people to camp down by the river where you're hearing that trickling brook and the wind as it goes over your tent. I don't care to camp where everybody else does. So what we do is we use some frame packs and we strap on our tents and our sleeping bags and we head on out. We hike it in.
Behind me here is Moraine Creek, and it's home to some of the most energetic rainbows that we fish and a huge run of sockeyes. And the scenery that you can see is just amazing. These rainbows are anywhere from 24 to 32 inches, and they're the hardest charging fish we catch all summer.
Our first fish of the day proved to be an absolute trophy. This hen topped the scales at almost 10 pounds. Anywhere else in the world, this would have been a fish of a lifetime, but here on Moraine, we caught fish like this all day long. It's no surprise that this place is one of the hottest rivers in Bristol Bay.
The fish on Moraine do get wise, and as a result, when you hook that big 30-inch fish, your trophy fish, oftentimes it's on a tippet that requires us to not horse the fish, and therefore we end up chasing it. So oftentimes a guy will hook a fish and it'll be spooling him and into his backing, and I'll just say, "Run! Run!" And it's because, you know, we've got to catch up that fish because we're not going to bring him back upriver. So yeah, you're gonna do some running.
By evening, all other anglers were comfortably tucked in at their respective lodges, probably already dreaming of the mighty moraine. We, on the other hand, were knee-deep in this fabled freestone, still battling it out with monster trout. For 5 anglers, 100 bear, and more fish than we cared to count, there were myriad memories still in the making. Long after the witching hour had passed, the sun slowly made its way toward the horizon. Reluctantly, we reeled up and called it a day. As the full moon rose over the valley, we drifted off into a peaceful sleep atop the Alaskan tundra. We awoke to a magnificent sunrise. During our restful slumber, an eerie fog had crept in from the coast and now illuminated the river in a golden light. Not long after, the siren's alluring call came convincingly from below, and we hastened to the moraine with rods in hand. For whatever reason, we caught some of the best fish of the trip a few hours before sunset and in the early morning light. In this land of 10,000 smokes, there are over 3,000 brown bear. Thanks to the work of the National Geographic Society, the region was designated as a national monument in 1918 and became a national park and preserve in 1980.
Moraine Creek is a special place. It's a pretty well-known river. It's clear water. It's got a huge run of sockeyes, and for some reason, just the way that the mountains funnel down into moraine from the coast, it draws a lot of bears. So it's not unusual to be standing in the river fishing and just take a minute and look around in a circle and count 15, 18 bears in a 360-degree circle around you. And there's bears up on the bluff, there's bears in the water, they're chasing fish into the pools. They'll be walking down the opposite bank from you as you're casting, and they're just kind of looking down into the water, and they dive in after a fish, and they'll pick one up. They're feeding their cubs on the bank. They're not interested in humans at all. They don't care that we're even there. They're just concerned about one thing, and that's eating fish.
This ecosystem is fueled by the Pacific salmon. During the spawn, these trout predominantly feed on sockeye eggs. Their diet is supplemented by other protein sources, including leeches, insects, salmon fry, and even small rodents. During the summer, these trout will grow inches and put on pounds just to prepare for the long winter ahead. The stubborn fog kept all planes off Crosswinds Lake until afternoon. As it turned out, we were alone on this fabled creek for over 18 hours. We made the most of every minute. Of course, camping isn't for everybody, but for this lot of fish-crazed fools, it will never be forgotten. It's amazing how fast a week can fly by. After fishing the Iliamna, Moraine, Copper, Tulare, and New Halen, we decided to head back to Katmai National Park in search of new water. Following a short flight from the lodge, we were greeted by the familiar scene of a mother and cub fishing for sockeye, and couldn't help but smile. Sure, the cub was cute, but we were smiling because bears meant salmon, and salmon meant trout. The only questions that remained were how big and how many. After tying on a fly and scoping out a promising run, it was time to find out. If there were one thing we could have done differently on Moraine Creek, it would have been to fish heavier rods. For the most part, our 6-weights were up to the task and performed perfectly. However, more fish than we cared to count got the better of us. With that 33-incher in mind, we dared not take the risk. So we brought the 8-weights and readied for steelhead-sized trout. It didn't take long to realize that even with the heavier rods, we were still undergunned. Next year, we're bringing 10s. Most trout in this neck of the woods average 20 inches or better. Like any good Boy Scout, the key up here is to be prepared when that 30-inch monster ambushes your fly. One of the best things about this river was the ability to get out of the boat and stalk trophies on foot. These runs were just stacked with enormous bows who acted famished. Out here the mentality is go big or go home. So we picked the biggest flies we could get our hands on and had the best success with 3-inch articulated leeches. When you come to Bristol Bay, make sure to leave your box of midges at home. These trout would turn those hooks into sewing needles and nothing flat. Today's non-stop action was the perfect culmination to one of the most amazing angling adventures ever experienced. Perhaps Robert Traver was onto something when he wrote, "I fish because I love to, because I love the environs where trout are found, which are invariably beautiful, and hate the environs where crowds of people are found, which are invariably ugly. Because in a world where most men seem to spend their lives doing things they hate, my fishing is at once an endless source of delight and an act of small rebellion. Because trout do not lie or cheat, and cannot be bought or bribed or impressed by power, but respond only to quietude and humility and endless patience. Because I suspect that men are going along this way for the last time, and I for one don't want to waste the trip. Because mercifully there are no telephones on trout waters. Because only in the woods can I find solitude without loneliness. Because bourbon out of an old tin cup always tastes better out there. Because maybe one day I will catch a mermaid. And finally, not because I regard fishing as so terribly important, but because I suspect that so many of the other concerns of men are equally unimportant, and not nearly so much fun."
I came to Alaska to guide for the experience, and it's been the best decision of my life.
This is the best trout fishing in the world, bar none. It's the prettiest water I've ever seen. It is the biggest rainbows I've ever seen. It's the largest salmon run in the world. It's spectacular.
Years ago, I came to Alaska to see the mountains, observe the wildlife, and to explore wild rivers which had never been run. Overcome by the beauty of the Talkeetnas, I stayed and made my home. Sharing the Talkeetna River is my way of helping people experience and appreciate their heritage of wild rivers. The lakes and rivers of Alaska have changed little over the years. They remain wild and pure as they have been for thousands of years. Remoteness and protective laws have left the animals unchanged by the presence of man. Here, on one of the countless lakes, in the heart of this raw land, is our base camp, our close neighbor, the beaver. The larger inhabitants consist of Dall sheep, wolf, caribou, moose, and bear. The moose are the largest in the world. A bull may have an antler spread of over 6 feet and can weigh more than the combined weight of 13 full-grown men. The magnificent grizzly is king of the Alaskan bush. He may weigh in excess of 1,000 pounds. In his search for food, he will roam from high alpine to river valleys. He eats roots, berries, and occasionally moose or caribou. A bear may look slow and clumsy, but they actually possess great speed and agility. Located in the Talkeetna Mountains, accessible only by bush plane, the Talkeetna River rushes towards its confluence with the Susitna River in the eastern shadow of Mount McKinley. This is the best wilderness whitewater in Alaska. Each time I fly over the river, memories of trips past return. In the early days, remote whitewater rivers, such as the Talkeetna, were considered dangerous. Only those who were a little crazy would attempt to run them. Over the years, the level of skill and equipment has vastly improved. With quality equipment and experienced guides,